What's up, everyone? My name's Horizon, and today I am going to be watching the current world record for the Dark Souls 3 speedrun for any percent. And it is done by TheCrazyLand, whose channel I'll have linked down below. But I thought it would be a cool thing to check out since the day I'm recording this is when I actually finished the game myself. So I figured while the game's fresh, it'd be cool to check everything out. So let's go ahead and jump right in. Very curious to see what builds they go with, what bosses are skippable. I'm assuming that they're going to have to take out all of the lords and get all of the lord souls, unless there's a way to glitch into the Soul of Cinder's last area. But I'm going to go ahead and assume that there isn't. Let's see. Game's a little quiet. But okay, so far it's going pretty much as I expected. They're just kind of speeding through every enemy. I feel like the boss fights are going to be a lot of parrying and ripostes, which for those of you that aren't aware, I'll point it out when it happens, but it's basically a way to counter most humanoid enemies. You use the shield to deflect their attack, and then you get an extra strong attack in to follow. It doesn't work for every boss or every attack, but the ones that do, it makes it significantly easier. Oh, and interesting, I didn't even... Okay, so the fog gate did pop up, because when they were pulling the sword out, that's how you initiate the boss fight. I saw an arrow fly by from the enemies that he aggroed running past, but luckily the fog gate initiated pretty quickly. And this is already the second phase of this boss, and it looks like they used firebombs to kind of speed through that. But the second phase, when it kind of goes into that big pus monster, those giant attacks can't be parried, so you either have to try and block them or just roll and avoid them. All right, so they're speeding to Firelink Shrine now. Let's see. Okay, so they're going to progress pretty normally, it looks like. Let's see, what are they buying? It looks like... I think they bought Homeward Bones, which they can use to teleport back here. Okay. Which I'm curious how they're going to do that, which... There is an item that you always have called the Dark Sign that you can use to teleport back safely no matter what, and it has unlimited uses. But the trade-off is you lose any souls that you currently have. So for them to buy Homeward Bones, it means that at some point they're going to actually need to use the souls that they gather up. That's already the second save and quit out, so I don't know if they're using that to circumvent some loading screens or what they're going on with that, but okay, so they're speeding through this area pretty quickly. Let's see, what are they going to grab here? Oh, they're just diving right on through. Are they going to rescue Greyrat or no? I forget if that's this direction or not. I'm assuming not, because to my knowledge there isn't any progression value that comes from rescuing him and his side quest. I wonder if he's going to get this bonfire. Nope. So there is another bonfire if he goes out of that door and goes up, but apparently there's no use for it, so... So I saw... Okay, so they must have bought some gold pine resin. Interesting. I'm curious what the save quit for that was. Maybe it was to reset the enemy positions? It could be, because there is that patrol there that he moves decently quick for how fast he is. So maybe there's a set spawn location for it, and saving and quitting out jumps right to it. I wonder if they're going to kill Emma. them coming in here, I'm assuming. So this is going to trigger... Yeah, they're doing that. So this triggers a boss fight that normally happens much later in the game. So later on, I will point out when... Because it looks like they're going to have to kill all of the lords. I'll point out when this boss should normally happen. Let's see. So another save out. Probably to skip the... Okay, interesting. So they're not actually fighting it, but they did trigger it. Maybe it's just to save the cutscene time later, because it is a mandatory fight, because it unlocks a ladder to get into the actual castle later on. But here's the first, what I consider the first actual boss of the game, Vort of the Boreal Valley, which is pretty straightforward. Nothing too crazy here. Extra weak to lightning damage, which explains why they bought the gold pine resin early on. I didn't catch it when it was happening, when they were speedrunning through the purchase menu, but you don't start out with that item, so that's the only way they could have got it. But this boss only really gets dangerous, semi-dangerous in the second phase, because it starts getting a little more aggressive and charging. So it seems like there's going to be much more saving out and like reloading than there was in the Dark Souls 1 speedrun I watched, but that might just be because there's a lot more cutscenes in this game. Which makes sense, because the world isn't as interconnected in this as it is in Dark Souls 1. It is to a large degree, but Dark Souls 1 is all completely interconnected, but this is a lot more about teleporting around, and there's a lot more bonfires to consolidate that. But this is the second major area. I don't really count the Cemetery of Ash, the first area they were in, when I'm talking about like first boss, first area, stuff like that, because it's more of a tutorial area than anything. But this area doesn't technically have a boss. It has an optional boss that you can fight, but I don't think it gives any kind of bonus that they're going to go with. And this area is very, very enemy dense, so the fact that they're just speeding through all of this is all the more impressive, because the enemies here have a huge range of attacks. There's a bunch of different ranged ones, spellcasters, big enemies, small enemies. Literally any type of combination of enemy that could really be in this game is almost in this area. And I think it's really cool that they're taking use of this sorcery here to minimize their fall damage, to skip so many large chunks of space. So the earlier part of this run was pretty predictable, but I'm very curious to see how it kind of splits off from here. So that's an NPC I actually didn't end up encountering, but with her being in a white garb like that, I'm going to assume she has something to do with miracles and stuff, so I wouldn't be surprised if some point in the run they end up picking up something like that, maybe like a lightning spear or something. But we'll see that as it comes up. And okay, interesting. What's the drop down here? Okay, I remember this area. There's normally a mini... Okay, this is the room where the mini boss was. I think that's a... I forget the actual name of the enemy, but it's something of the Boreal Valley, kind of like that first boss, Vort. And there's kind of a running theme of Boreal Valley enemies and bosses where they all kind of have a bluish hue to them and do frost damage. But okay, so it looks like they're going to... I think this area is called the Road of Sacrifices. It's kind of just an uneventful transition zone. It has a couple enemies that pop up later on, but it's more so to connect to... I'm blanking on the name of the next area, but it's kind of like a wetlands area. There's a bunch of giant crabs, a bunch of really annoying enemies there. And there is a boss there, the Crystal Sage, which I could see them... I think that's going to be one of the bosses they have to fight, because I think that it blocks off an entrance to a mandatory item they need to... Okay, and are they going to talk to... No, they're actually going to kill them. Okay, so those two characters actually have a really interesting and sad story that they're apparently going to pay no attention to and are just going to murder. I'm assuming, yeah, because of the loot they drop and already teleporting back to the shrine. I'm curious for what. Okay, selling souls. I think they're... Are they going to try and level up? No. Okay, so there's the NPC they talked to, buying a ring. Okay, so they did end up buying a miracle. I didn't register which one, but I'm sure we'll see it pop up here soon. So in my playthrough, I didn't... Oh, so it's called Tears of Denial. I didn't take on any spells. I was purely just a strength build, more or less. Just used a big sword to smack things. Which I kind of like doing for my first playthrough of Soulsborne games, just because I feel like it's a more straightforward approach. And a lot of the spells are tied into random side missions and stuff. So I know that I'm going to end up missing some key part of it, and I'm not going to be as strong as I could be. Looks like... Okay, so here's the first major glitch that looks like is happening. So they're using a mix-up... Okay, so it looks like they keep equipping and unequipping the sword that they got from killing one of those NPCs that I mentioned with the side quest. I wonder if that's to maintain the glitched state. So it looks like they're trying to make their way to maybe the cathedral? That's the only thing I can really guess right now, because that is the first area that has an item that drops. Are they going to Farron Keep? And the player is invisible. And I'm assuming that whenever they teleport back or save out and quit and stuff, that'll come back. Okay, so it has to be something to do with maintaining the glitched movement if they're going back and doing it. It's really interesting, the little mechanics that they're able to find to pull off such major glitches like this. I'm trying to follow where they're going, because to get to the last area of the game, like I mentioned early on, there's 3 or 4 bosses that you have to kill and collect their soul. I think it's 4. I know there was 4 in Dark Souls 1, so I might just be getting that number from that. Let's see, so it's Yorm, Aldrich, the Twin Princes, and Watcher Knights. So, okay, so there is 4. And judging... Okay, so they're already in the Catacombs of Carthus, which is actually right after the first Lords of Cinder that they're going, which is the Watcher Knights, which actually is right above that staircase there. But it looks like they're just skipping those entirely. I'm trying to think. So yeah, you go through the Watchers down into Carthus, and then the only area I can think of that's below that is Smoldering Lake, which is an optional area. And then the actual area that you progress into past is... I think it's called Irithyll. It's a Boreal Valley kind of area, so it's a lot of snow, ice enemies, stuff like that. Which does lead to eventually 2 of the lords. And yeah, okay, so that looks like where that's going. You can kind of see from all the white and light blue hues there. And it looks like they're going to end up going back onto the bridge, maybe? Irithyll of the Boreal Valley, okay. And they're going to use that bonfire there, I'd imagine. Okay. And okay, so they're actually just continuing. So I guess interacting with the bonfire doesn't stop the glitch either. So it makes sense that they're skipping the bridge there because there is a mini boss encounter there that happens that is with a fairly difficult enemy, and it's a beast type enemy, so you can't really parry it or anything like you would the humanoids. So I'm not surprised that they're skipping that at all. Okay, so there's finally a quit out and a reload coming, which I'm assuming will bring back the character's visibility. Okay, yep, here we are. So where are they off to now? Because there's a couple key enemies in this area that they could go to. And it looks like they might... I think this is the path they have to take to go to... Is this the Profane Capital? With Yorm? Okay, I was very thrown off by the fact that they were about to do a save and quit out, but were still clearly moving. So that must have meant that they needed a really precise point to save and reload. This area I hate. One of the enemies that's going to pop up here, the jailers, they have an ability that temporarily lowers your max health. So even if you heal up, they can shrink it to where you can have this giant bar of health, but they can shrink it to the point where they're capable of killing you in one hit if you let it drag on long enough. And there's a lot of them in this area. You could kind of see it move down there a little bit and going back up now. And then I knew of this skip to get to the Profane Capital because normally there's a whole winding path that you have to take with a bunch of enemies to end up here. But there's a couple skips you can do, like either with a spell or there's a ring that reduces fall damage that you can take. And then, yeah, there's a big gargoyle that I'm assuming they're just going to run straight by. And then luckily there's a bonfire. Not going to use the bonfire. Okay. So it looks like they're going to skip right to the Yorm fight, which I'm curious to see if they end up actually doing the fight, because this is one of the lords that you have to collect the souls for. But it's an interesting fight because it's based around a gimmick where you have to pick up a specific weapon and use what's called the weapon art to it, which is when you two-hand the weapon and press either L2 or left trigger or whatever the keyboard equivalent is to perform an attack unique to that weapon. And with this attack, the weapon called Storm Ruler does this really big wind attack that does a ton of damage to this boss because the Yorm, I think, has, let's say, 25,000 health. So it's charging up the attack there. Your normal attacks do maybe 100 to it. And the charge up attack there just did 6,000, as you can see. So I don't know if I just did this fight badly, but when I landed these attacks, it did not stagger Yorm like this. And for me, this was a very intimidating boss fight because he's obviously huge, but you can't really get a ton of space away from him, which I was trying to do to charge up that attack. Because if you get far away, he sprints over very, very quickly. And his attacks do a lot of damage. But clearly, this guy made short work of him. But okay, so selling the Lord's Soul to get more souls, buying more Homeward bones, it looks like. and just maxing up luck. Which I'm not 100% sure what that stat does in this. Maybe critical strikes? Or avoidance or something like that, just to maybe reduce some RNG aspects of the fights that they do actually have to take. And looks like we're glitching back again. Barely survived. So I don't know if I didn't catch if they cast a miracle or something to prevent like a death blow or something. But I'm assuming that, so normally there's a boss that you're going to have to fight that I believe unlocks your ability to get to the next area. But I could see them possibly trying to just use this glitch to skip that aspect entirely and just progress into the next area. Which, for those of you that have played Dark Souls 1, you'll recognize immediately, because it's one of the most distinct areas from that game. But it looks very, very different. And yeah, they're heading away from that first boss that I mentioned, and just floating now. So yeah, I'm assuming they're just going to somehow do something to raise their height and elevate themselves to this new area, because it's very, very high up. Are they just naturally gaining height? Doesn't really look like it. I'm very curious how finicky this glitch is, like if there's a set path that you have to take while you're glitched, or if you're just in essentially a floating state and you can kind of freeform move. That's funny because they register with actual ground. Oh, and it looks like enemies still register them too. That's interesting. Ooh, very, very near miss there. And Anor Londo. One of the most famous areas from Dark Souls 1. Okay, so I'm curious why they're doing that now. If you're more familiar with the Dark Souls 3 speedruns and know why they're doing that, please let me know in the comments, because I'm genuinely curious. Because I thought it was to maintain the glitched movement, but they were able to move for a minute or two at a time without doing that. So clearly it's not tied to that. Are they going to try and glitch through this door? Nope. So they're raising themselves up to skip over here and glitch. Are they actually going to have... I would imagine they have to fight this boss, because they need his Lord Soul. So the lore behind this boss is very creepy. As you can see, part of the boss is hanging below the ground there. And you can see it's made of a bunch of skeletons and stuff. Oh, okay, so they're going to kill the boss without actually triggering the combat. Very interesting. That honestly makes sense, because the boss does a lot of movements where it dives beneath the ground and pops up in random areas, and has a couple attacks that, especially for the low amount of health that they have, would kill them very, very quickly. But yeah, the lore behind this boss is basically that it was a member of the Cathedral of the Deep, and they were a cannibal. And I forget if the cathedral like gave them human sacrifices or something, but they basically consumed so much that they became just a big black ooze. And just it kept going and becoming more and more gluttonous, to the point where it decided to try and start consuming gods, which if you actually do the fight, you fight... The boss's name is Aldrich. So you fight Aldrich as it's consuming a boss from Dark Souls 1 that is pretty recognizable. So you basically interrupt the boss trying to consume a god. So the boss is kind of being, or the god is kind of being used as like a puppet during the fight. So it's very, very creepy. Okay, so they're back in the initial area now where they triggered that first boss fight. And you didn't really catch a glimpse of it, but the boss is already loaded down there. But it looks like they're just skipping it entirely, going to maybe... I think they're going to try and head just straight towards the Twin Princes, which is the next Lord Soul. And I'm surprised they're speeding through this. This area I had a very tough time with. There's a ton of enemies, a lot of environmental issues. Like, up here, there's two wyverns that breathe a ton of fire, do a ton of damage, which you'll see there. And, wow, I'm really, really surprised they're able to get through that with that little health. Because the fire that they breathe out takes up such a huge area. Yeah, so they're skipping here. Yeah, I still am not catching why they do that. So are they going to have to fight? I wouldn't imagine that they're going to fight this boss. Or it looks like they are. Or maybe just going to run straight past. Ooh, that was very close. That boss fight's actually a lot of fun. It's sort of a callback to a pretty popular boss in Dark Souls 1, but still like with a little bit of a twist. So this was a very interesting area. This is the Grand Archives. This area had a lot to do with the curse status ailment, which is my least favorite in the whole game, because in Dark Souls 1, if you were cursed, you died immediately. But then when you came back, your max health was half of what it originally is. And in order to get it removed, you have to use a specific item, which cost quite a few souls. But I would assume it does the same thing in this game, but I fortunately never got cursed in Dark Souls 3, so never had to deal with it. Yeah, there's a bunch of caster enemies in this area, so it looks like they're needing the Titanite that drops, so I'm assuming they're going to use some kind of item upgrade at some point. But yeah, those hands that reach out of the books there, I know they were only there for a second, but those slowly build up curse if you stand there. Unless you do something weird where you, like, dip yourself in wax. Because you can't really see it, but those enemies there, their top half is covered in wax. You can see that there's, like, a little wick and a lit candle. Don't really know the lore behind that. Super weird. Yeah, this area was very weird because normally as you progress through an area, you unlock bonfires as checkpoints, so you don't have to go back. But this one, you would unlock shortcuts that take you back to the original bonfire. So you kept going back to that same first bonfire, but then you could just use the shortcut that you unlocked to get to a later point. And those three enemies there were pretty annoying. They killed me once or twice. Because there's a warrior, a ranger with like a bow and daggers, and then a spellcaster that all attack you at once. Which, if you can isolate them, are fine enough, but together they do a lot of damage very quickly. So, okay, so yeah, they're using some of the Titanite to bump up that weapon. Which means that they're going to have to do an actual fight here fairly soon, I would imagine. And then just bumping up luck more. So I'm assuming it has to do something with like critical strike damage, or critical strike chance at least. Okay, so the Carthus Rouge, it's the item I'm kind of blocking here, but when you equip that to the item, I believe it gives your weapon the chance to cause a bleed status, which, with him using that, I'm assuming the boss coming up is weak to it. But yeah, this part's interesting. They're not going to show it, but up here is a double door entrance leading to the next boss. But right here to the right is another shortcut that goes back to that first bonfire. That is how you end up coming back to this boss fight if you end up dying. And this boss fight, I'm going to try and explain it now before it really starts, but it's 2 bosses and 2 phases. The first phase, you just fight the one boss, and he just has a sword, does some straightforward attacks and stuff. But the second phase, so it's 2 brothers. The other brother comes and revives him and initiates the second phase after you drain all of his health, and kind of hangs on his back and casts spells while this boss still fights like this. And the goal is to kill the smaller brother that keeps reviving him, while this other one is constantly attacking you. So yeah, here this cutscene gets skipped, but yeah, he's revived now. That attack is very annoying because the projectiles shoot for a lot longer than you would expect, and they do a lot of damage. So on a couple of attempts against this fight, their attacks combined in such a way that it brought me from full health basically to nothing in a matter of a couple seconds. So there is something you can do if you're able to stay behind the boss. Your swings actually damage both brothers, which clearly they prioritized there. But if you kill the bigger brother again, the younger brother just tries to revive it and the fight keeps cycling. But while the revive is going on, you have a chance to do damage directly to the small brother without worrying about the attacks coming. So it's a weird kind of balance of what you need to focus on while also dodging attacks. Okay, so now they're finally going back to Farron Keep and the Watchers. So it looks like there isn't any glitch, at least that the community's currently aware of, that skips the need to fight these 4 bosses. So the boss coming up is also very interesting because there's one main boss that you have to fight, but there are duplicates of it that spawn periodically that attack basically the first thing that, or the most recent thing that does damage to it, which can be you, but if you let the attack, or if you let the boss like swing and hit it, the mini, I guess the mini bosses will start attacking the boss for you, which probably won't be showcased here. But there's 2 phases of the fight anyway, so you can see one popping up in the back and then dropping immediately. But the second phase, the main guy, he's alone, but basically gets super powered to where all of his attacks do fire damage and leave a trail of fire. So from what I've heard, this is one of the more difficult boss fights for people, but it only took me a couple of attempts, so I think I just got lucky with it. But they knocked it down pretty quick, so now they're going to place the 4 Lord Souls on each of their respective thrones, which is going to activate a portal with the bonfire to take them to the last area in the game. So they're doing that, okay. And then they're going to go down to that bonfire right there. And I'm very curious to see how they approach this last fight, because there's two phases worth of health bars that you have to go through, and the boss has a lot of attacks, pretty big range, a lot of mobility. So I'm curious to see what speed strat is done to mitigate what the boss is actually capable of doing. So that was clearly some kind of placement that they had to do for, I'm assuming, a frame perfect or pixel perfect quit out. Okay, interesting. So it glitched it out to where the boss doesn't actually initiate aggro. Is that going to be the whole time? Because when you drain this first health bar, there is going to be a second phase that starts, but also still there isn't a cutscene that initiates it. Okay, so yeah, here's phase 2. Okay, so no, it's not going to fight back at all. So really interesting. So that movement glitch that they did with the save and quit out was apparently to circumvent the aggro radius of the boss, so that you can just sit there and smack it and kill it with no fear of it actually attacking. So yeah, there we are. That is the Dark Souls any percent main run of the game. It doesn't include DLC or anything, but that was really interesting. Normally, any percent runs like this do have pretty major glitches that skip the unnecessary parts of the games. So I was very curious to see what they did with that. So yeah, that is the current world record time, 31 minutes and 48 seconds. That was very, very cool. Lots of very precise movement. I'm assuming a lot of very precise setups to get the glitches initiated and the precise saves and quit outs and stuff, but that was really, really entertaining. Well done. That was fun to analyze because, like I said, I just finished fighting Soul of Cinder tonight, as of recording this. So it was cool to see. If you enjoyed my analysis, feel free to toss the video a like and subscribe, because this is going to be something I do consistently with the channel. My name's Horizon. I appreciate you watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.